Welcome to the Chapter 49 podcast for January 28th, 2022. My name is Larry Lannan. I am a volunteer in the area of communications and a retiree. Of course, Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. I'm very happy that you've joined us today. And once again, I wish to welcome Chapter 49 President Duncan Giles back into the podcast. What would a Chapter 49 podcast be without Duncan Giles? Welcome back.
Thanks, Larry. And it would probably be better without me, but it is what it is.
We've never tried that, so I'm not sure how it would work. I don't think people would really be too excited by watching me sit here and just talk for 30 minutes. So, yes, I need somebody to bounce back all these things and go back and forth a little more interesting that way. We have a snowy day here in central Indiana, a little more snow than we had predicted, but predictions of snow are a little difficult. And meteorologists have always told me that in my years working in the radio business. And it looks like, I know you have no window. You'd like to mention that. But I do have a window here in my office, and it's pretty clear that we're getting a little more snow than expected. Although we're not going to get the snow the East Coast is getting. They're about to get hit with a pretty serious snowstorm.
Yeah, for those folks, it's batten down the hatches. In central Indiana, where we are, it's almost been a snow hole. It goes north of us, south of us. We've been pretty lucky this winter for those of us who are not snow freaks. But so if it's going to snow a little bit today, that's okay.
I want to say that I want to apologize as a producer of this program and also one of the people who host it, that we had some glitches last week. I was down in Florida with a little different setup and wasn't quite as sophisticated as I have here in my office in Fishers, Indiana, which is where I am today. And so there were a couple of glitches. So please forgive me for last week. You had a good guest, though. Dan Casper gave us a very good rundown on what was going on from the perspective of the people in Washington, D.C. and the national office of NTEU.
I think Dan's very knowledgeable. I don't care what Lori McCann says about him.
Here's the thing about you and Lori McCann. For people who forget, she's the Chapter 10 president in Chicago and was part of the team for negotiating the national agreement. You and Lori were the two chapter presidents there the whole time. Others were in and out. But the two of you, 1 minute you're complimenting each other, the next minute you're zinging each other. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Lori and I have a great deal of respect for each other. She is an awesome chapter leader and an even better person. But do I like to have fun with her? Oh yeah, I am having no issues with having a little bit of fun with her.
Yeah, that comes across loud and clear for who's been around the two of you, as I have a couple of times remotely, but still it comes across there. Well, let's get down to business. And when we talked to Dan Casper last week, he made a very important point that, we've talked about returning to the office. And he made the point that, at some of these campus processing centers, there have been people working in the office for a long time, months, over a year. In Indiana, we have a few people who have had to come into the office for various reasons. Some are clerical, some others. They should be recognized. This is a very difficult time to be working in any office, large or small, when only a few people are there. So even though we're going to talk in a moment about returning to the office, there are still people at IRS and not too small a number who have been going to the office for some time now.
Yeah, those folks in the service center, the folks in our tax, which are our walk-in offices, as you mentioned, the clericals that like to come in, that have to come in, folks in call sites across the country where they're not able to work from home. These are people who have been coming in for quite a long period of time. And I'm thankful for everybody that's able to do that and that has to do that is willing to make that sacrifice, because it's not easy. It can be a scary place because of the way that COVID just shoots around, especially with this latest variant. And, our folks everywhere, whether they're at home or in the office, are doing yeoman's work and doing a great job. But it just adds another complicating factor to their lives when they do have to come in.
So let's talk about the return to the office as it affects most employees, certainly not all, as we just mentioned. But we don't have any kind of date to return to the office. IRS has to give some notice before that happens, and everybody's not going to come in back at the same time. So there's a lot going on here. Please update us on what you know.
Yeah, this is something that is very important at this point. There is a lot, I'm going to emphasize that again, a lot of conjecture about when the offices are going to reopen. And, people are hearing, well, it's going to be happening March 1st. It's going to be happening. As of Wednesday evening, the IRS has told National NTEU there is no set date for the offices to reopen. We don't know when they're going to be reopening. So if somebody tells you the office is going to be reopening at such and such a date, they do not know that because the date has not been set. And also keep in mind that the IRS has said that at a minimum, they will give a 30 days notice to employees when they're going to be reopening the office. So we're going to have at least 30 days notice. And if they were going to open it in March 1st, as many have speculated, they would basically have to give the notice today. And that's not happening. Now, the IRS has been talking about doing this in apparently 2 phases. And the discussion has been, okay, who's going to be in phase 1? Who's going to be in phase 2? Who's considered mission critical? That would be every freaking employee to me, but that's neither here nor there. We need to wait and see how that's going to play out. National NTU is absolutely going to have a role in this because I believe we share, I know and National NTU feels this way as well as the local chapters, and I'm sure many in the IRS hierarchy do as well, that employee safety is of the utmost concern. That even when we do return to the office, there's going to need to still be social distancing. There's going to need to be mask enforcement. So these are things that are going to have to be done, and management is going to be solely responsible for making sure this is taken care of, or else there are going to be serious issues. So there's still a lot to work through before we have that return to the office.
I think we need to realize that I didn't even know they still use that term mission critical. I thought that was a NASA term, mission critical, and it's still being used with IRS. And I don't think being a former manager, I would not want to be in the business of deciding who is mission critical and who is not.
Yeah, it goes back to the essential employees versus non-essential. And I'm sorry, every single employee that we have, I've never encountered a non-essential employee unless we're talking some executives who I have no idea what exactly they're doing. And to be quite honest, there are a lot of executives that don't have the ideas what some of those executives are doing.
That's very well stated, Duncan. Now, you touched on something there that I want to talk about some more. Testing protocol. You've mentioned in our last podcast that sometimes supplies for testing are lacking. There are supply chain issues in a lot of areas, and just the basic ingredients to getting a successful test done. I just saw a news article this morning that if you have one of those home test kits and it gets out in the cold and freezes, it's not any good anymore. Whatever you're getting out of a reading is not going to be accurate. So there are all sorts of complications to a testing protocol. And I'm just curious what we do and do not know about any potential testing protocol that would come with a return to the office.
That's going to be part and parcel of returning to the office, and the IRS is, quote, working on testing protocols. I like to use the air quotes with some of this stuff because it's like, that's a very nebulous term. They're working on the protocols. They've told National NTU that this should be out. The protocols should be out to National NTU sometime in mid-February. That doesn't mean they're going to be ready to roll them out. That means that they're ready to discuss what they've come up with. Now, it's been my experience in the few years that I've been chapter president, 2 decades, that
few years
that most of the time when IRS is ready to roll something out and they've considered every option and they've taken a look at this from every angle. They run it by national NTEU, and national NTEU usually only has, 1 to 2 dozen points that they want to raise. The IRS goes, oh, yeah, we really didn't consider that, or we didn't think about that. So it'll be interesting to see once they do share with national what the testing protocols are, what the potential holes in it is. Because like you said, the tests could be interesting. They're going to be sending people on administrative time to get tested, whoever needs to be tested. That's still to be determined. We don't know how long a turnaround time is going to be on those tests. We don't know, okay, if somebody's told to take a test, they go and they get administrative time to take the test. Now, how long are the results going to take, and what's going to be the employee's status while they're awaiting those results? You would think it would be administrative time, but we're still not sure what IRS is going to propose. So there's a lot of moving parts that are still going on with that. So again, if somebody says, well, I know there's going to be testing protocols and I know exactly what the testing protocols are, I don't think so.
We haven't done the mailbag. We did one time, mainly because most of the questions you receive, we incorporate into our podcast each week. But you have shared with me a number of questions that you have had over the past few weeks about COVID leave. Can I take that special leave that was tied to the COVID pandemic? So when you get the question, how do I claim COVID leave? What is your answer?
The answer is, unfortunately, for if you are ill, there isn't any leave that you can specific leave you can take. It was authorized by Congress. The emergency paid leave that covered COVID illnesses was authorized by Congress. And that expired at the end of the fiscal year last year. So it expired at the end of September. And Congress has not re-upped that and doesn't give any indication that they're going to. So, there's still the caregiver leave that's out there, but that's for very specific, narrow circumstances when you're caring for a child whose school is closed, or something of that nature, or someone who is elderly living with you that is incapable of self-care. Those are the two very narrow things. Aside from that, if you get COVID, or you got suspected COVID, or you're told by your doctor to quarantine, you're going to need to take your own leave for that. Now, you can get leave without pay if you wish for this. And in some instances, we've heard that across the country, employees have asked for advanced sick leave and been told by management in some areas, we're not sure how much or how scattered it is, that they cannot get advanced sick leave for COVID. And that's absolutely false. They should be able to get advanced sick leave if they are requesting it, if they are sick at home from COVID. And if you have a positive COVID test, that's the documentation you need. There shouldn't, the doctor says, stay home. Okay, if the doctor says stay home and you've got a positive COVID test, that should suffice for what you need to get the advanced sick leave or the leave without pay due to basically having to quarantine so you're not infecting others.
Yeah, and advanced sick leave, I think we need to make the point here that the law is clear that advanced sick leave is totally just up to the discretion of the management. Now, when I was a manager, I didn't have too many of these, but whenever I had a request from one of my employees for advanced sick leave, I was very, I considered it very carefully and looked at all the circumstances. And if I could, I always tried to give out that advanced sick leave if the circumstances warranted it. And I think your point is very well taken. And if a manager says you cannot get advanced sick leave for COVID, you're right. That's totally false. Those rules have not changed. They've been around for ages, and it's up to the manager to make that decision. And the union doesn't have a lot of rights there as far as challenging that. But I think if you make you should be able to make a good case to your manager. And if you're denied there, go to the next manager and see what you can do.
Yeah, because there is in the contract, and it continues in the 2022 national agreement, that Yeah, it is up to management's discretion, but it does say in the contract that if you meet these particular circumstances, you will be granted advanced sick leave. And if you are not expected to retire anytime soon, and you have the advanced sick leave available, you haven't already reached the maximum there, this does qualify for it with the COVID. So there shouldn't be a problem with a denial.
And the thing you have to remember is that advanced sick leave does have to be paid back, and that's why you mentioned that not being close to retirement, you have to have enough time to pay it back reasonably. So there's a lot involved in advanced sick leave, but if you have any questions, talk to Duncan, because there is some contract language about that where the management has committed, even though they have total statutory authority to grant or deny this, that in certain circumstances, the management is committed to go ahead and do that. And COVID is certainly an issue which would be part of that discussion. And don't let any manager get away with saying that advanced sick leave cannot be used for COVID. That's not true at all. The same basic rules apply with or without COVID. So
Exactly.
anything to add on all that?
Nope, I think you covered it very well. That's exactly correct.
Now, here's another thing, and I wondered about this for a while. Never really said much about it, but I know you would like to talk about this today because you're hearing about this. All right, let's say you've contracted COVID and you feel you have the ability to prove that you contracted COVID at work. It's not an easy thing to do, but let's just say you feel you can make that case with evidence that you contracted COVID at work. Then the question comes up, can you file for workman's compensation? Well, the answer to that question is a little bit like, can I file a lawsuit? Anybody can file a lawsuit at any time about anything. Winning is an entirely different thing. Same thing for this situation on workers' comp. Of course, you can file for workers' comp, but Duncan, the real question is, what are your chances of prevailing?
Yeah, that's always the fun with workman's comp. You would have to sit there and be able to prove, many people said, well, I know I caught it from this person. Okay, so you're only around this person for, whether you're at home or whether you're at work, that's the only person you're around. Well, no, I'm also around, A, B, C, and D. Well, how do you know it's not possible you caught it from A, B, C, or D? So the devil's always in the details. Workman's comp can be extremely difficult to get. I would not dissuade anybody from trying it if they do think that they have a case that they are pretty certain that they caught it. But early on in my career, I had a slip and fall injury on some ice going from an office to a classroom. And it was in front of witnesses. And I, took a pretty nice fall. And I went home for the day and took the next day off because my back was stiffening up. So it wasn't a great deal of time. And, like I said, I had witnesses, including a manager who saw it. But the amount of pushback and paperwork and things that they were asking for, just made it almost impossible for me to claim it. And so I basically just threw up my hands at that time, and said, okay, I'm not going to, I'll take sick leave for a day and a half. I'm not going to worry about this. But when you're off for COVID, you could be off for, a couple of weeks potentially. So it becomes a much greater financial hit and something you may want to fight further for. So, if you have this type of situation and you're reasonably certain that you can narrow it down to exactly who at work gave you COVID and you can make that case, I would never discourage anybody from trying to get workman's comp.
So go in with your eyes wide open, understand what you're facing, and certainly you can file for it, but be prepared for what's ahead of you. So good advice on that front. Let's move on to something that we talked about in the last podcast with Dan Casper being in charge of the field offices that give legal help to NTEU chapters. We did mention that really just about the time we recorded the podcast last week, discipline had been paused for not having vaccinations. It was a district court in Texas, and the judge's ruling, he said, covered the entire nation, not just his district in Texas. I think the Justice Department took about 3 hours to file an appeal. With the appeals court, that appeal is still pending. So at this point, discipline has been paused. Our attorneys have sort of given us what we expect to happen at the appeals court. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm hearing, after reading the decision and looking at it very closely and talking with our field reps, it, I believe that the judge in Texas had good intentions, but taking a look at his decision and the legal basis for his decision, I don't think it's going to hold up in the appeals court, just because of the fact that he compared this with the Supreme Court decision with OSHA regulations for companies with over 100 employees. And this is totally a different situation with the executive branch, with the president being in charge of the executive branch and basically having that order. It's almost the same thing as a company saying, okay, as a condition of employment, you have to get this vaccination. That's been the, when we had Jim Bailey on, a couple of months ago, our former national vice president and head of our field organizing and field offices, he was, he laid it out beautifully that there's just 100 years of case law on this, that this federal judge in Texas basically just disregarded. And so we feel pretty strongly that this is going to come back. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to not have to worry about this, I'm unvaccinated, I don't want to get the vaccination, and I should be fine. I would not have that false sense of security at this point. I would still be looking to get vaccinated, because I do believe that the discipline that's in abeyance now will continue to move forward once the appeals court rules on this. So like I said, I understand people don't like mandates. I'm not a fan of mandates, but I do believe vaccination is the best way to go. So you better consider that.
And that's a very important point you make, Duncan, because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of where this stands now is that, all right, these suspensions that have been proposed are being held in abeyance. They're just being stayed. They have not been withdrawn. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So if there's an appeals court ruling the other way and takes that away, we're right back to where we started on this discipline. Is that what I'm understanding?
That you are exactly correct. It'll start right back up where it stopped at that point. They still do have the right to ask for vaccination status. That has not changed. It's the discipline part that has been the issue. And I've even heard some people talk to me about, well, these people who have retired or left the service because of the vaccination mandate, are they going to be able to come back if they wish? And apparently a high up official in our human capital office, HCO, I was told yesterday during some sort of meeting that he was asked about this, and the response that was given was, I don't know, which frankly scared the hell out of me, because unless there is an announced vacancy, they're not going to be able to come back. It's not one of those things where, you can sit there and say, okay, I retired. Okay, now it's 2 months later, I decided I want to unretire and come back and do exactly the same thing I was doing, exactly the same place, at exactly the same pay. It doesn't work like that under the federal statutes. You can't do that. So to hear somebody from HCO say, oh, sure, yeah, we don't know. No, I'm sorry. I do know labor law. They can't do that. And that person from HCO should absolutely have not tried to placate somebody and told them that.
Well, I do know this much. Once you have retired and that decision is final and you've put your paperwork in, if you want to come back, you can only come back as a reemployed annuitant. And there are lots of complications to that. So don't think you could just come in and go back to where you were before and unretire yourself. That is not an option, and that's a statute. That's not something IRS has discretion over.
Right.
So
Exactly so.
that was my reaction, was like, okay, I was asked to come back as a reemployed annuitant when the service was desperate for instructors. And I just said, no, I don't think I want to do that, because my father worked for the Defense Department, and most of his working life after he retired, he actually did come back as a reemployed annuitant for a period of time. You worked half a day or something. So I know all the adjustments that have to be made and so forth. So there is no option to come back as you were before. And the reemployed annuitant thing is still, there are a lot of hoops that have to go through that. And you're right, there has to be an opening. And what is the service plan opening up a ton of positions just for retirees? I don't think you could legally do that either. I could be
Exactly.
wrong, but
Exactly. Yeah, I had a lot of confusion when I heard that, and I was the person who had told me that, I was quizzing them pretty carefully, and I had heard that from a couple other people that that there was a lot of interest in people who had left the service because they didn't want to be vaccinated. Now, having heard about the court case in Texas, wanting to come back, and it's just not that easy.
Well, we have just a couple of minutes left. I want to give you a chance to talk about something that you were very proud of, that your bargaining team was able to get the service to do, and that was to set up a child care subsidy program. It's people only of a certain income level, but still there were going to be a number of IRS employees who were going in the lower income brackets who were going to be able to take advantage of this child care subsidy program. I know that the service is having trouble getting a vendor to do this on a national level. So explain where that's at right now.
Yeah, this program is still rolling out. It's still going to be happening. It's just a matter of starting this from the ground up is not easy. We knew there would be issues. When I say we, IRS and National NTU knew there would be issues. It's not something you can just do at the snap of a finger. And so it's rolling along, and they're trying to get everything together, and, trying to make sure who's going to qualify, what the income levels are, how they're going to be working on the family income type piece. There's a lot of moving pieces to this, and they're still trying to get everything straightened out. So it will be happening. It's not moving as fast as anyone would like. And when I say anyone, I'm talking about NTU, IRS employees, anyone, but it will be coming up. So if you're thinking, okay, this has gone by the wayside, or it's not going to be done. No, this is something that NTU has championed. It was Ken Moffitt, our national negotiator, and a couple of time guests on our podcast came up with this. It's been a great idea. It's a great program for folks who qualify for it, and we just need to give it the time to work through.
Yeah, and I think the main point here is what you're saying is the service agreed to this because they thought it was a good idea for their employees. They want this program. They're not dragging their feet. They're just having trouble getting it together. And as you mentioned, even your bargaining team understood that it would be a difficult startup and rollout, but the work is still continuing. That's the point you want to make.
Exactly.
Well, about out of time here, Duncan. Once again, your last shot. Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I've got two quick hits. The first one is going to be starting on Monday for NTU members at a certain income level. You're going to be able to do free tax filing if going through the NTU website. There was no income level last year. The IRS imposed an income level on all VITA partners this year. So it is going to be, it's not going to be available to everyone, but for those who qualify, because the income level is the same for single or family, you not only get to be able to file for free, but it doesn't cost you to electronically file for state or federal. And those can be quite the savings, and the information on that's available at ntu.org. The second thing is, we're still not out of the woods on this stuff, folks. I would urge anyone who is still hesitant about getting vaccinated to do so, and especially with Omicron out there, is to get a booster. It's been scientifically shown that getting a booster will help you with this, and it doesn't eliminate the fact that you might get COVID. It doesn't do that, but it greatly reduces the symptoms. It'll keep you hopefully out of the hospital for the most part, aside from a small percentage of breakthrough cases. And I just, again, just want everybody to be healthy out there. We've lost far too many people to this, and I just don't want to see anybody else have that happen to them.
And it should be pointed out that the experts say that, when we thought we were over this many months ago, that the experts look back on that data and say we, as a society, probably opened up too quickly and too fast. When the Omicron variant popped up, all of a sudden we went back to a place we didn't want to be. So just understand that being careful is a very important ingredient to protecting yourself, your family, and just everyone around you. So, Duncan Giles, thank you very much. If all goes well, we will be back next week with another edition of the Chapter 49 podcast. If you would like to get links to our audio and video versions, all you have to do is contact Duncan Giles. He has an email list, and he'll put you on that list to receive the audio and video links every time we have a podcast. All you have to do is just go into the internal email system, or you can go to nteu49@aol.com and ask to be put on that list, and Duncan will be glad to do that. You'll be notified of our podcasts, video and audio each week. We thank you again for listening. Hope you're doing well and look forward to speaking to you soon. So please be safe and be kind.